back with the WMAY morning news feed. Let's connect now with Congressman Rodney Davis. I'm Greg Bishop. It's 722, 55 degrees. Congressman, thanks for taking time this morning with us on WMAY, and a lot to cover, including some recent votes and a lot of fingers being pointed. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. I'm just always glad to be on with you because I'm shocked you got a show every time I get on here.
Oh, well, yeah, we'll see how long that goes. Congressman,
good to see you, Michael. Good to speak with you. Buddy.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the debt ceiling. Apparently, there's a deadline coming up this week, and it's something that hasn't been done in years, but it really is also something that could impact the full faith and credit of the United States of Illinois. What's going on with the debt ceiling?
Well, the debt ceiling vote is something that I've supported in the past, but we've always had a plan to try to rein in spending at the same time. At the same time, the Democrats want Republicans to vote for a debt ceiling increase. They also were discussing spending $3.5 trillion in crippling tax increases and passing their Green New Deal agenda. I just can't be for that. And they're in charge. So they ought to be able to get the votes to do anything they want. Let's see if they can.
Congressman, the U.S. Senator from Illinois, of course, Dick Durbin, pointing fingers yesterday after a test vote to increase the debt ceiling, I believe, and have a continued resolution because there's also the possibility of government shutdown if something's not done. He pointed fingers at Republicans and said, Republicans just want to dine and dash. That former President Trump had an involvement in all the spending during COVID as well, almost saying that you guys need to take responsibility as well for all the spending that's happened.
And Dick Durbin said that. He said dine and dash.
Let me pull up the quote really quick and just get your direct reaction to it because this came out late yesterday after the failed vote in the Senate, and he said that let me pull it up here. Got it right in front of me. Right now, our number one priority should be keeping the nation's economy on the path to recovery. Instead, Republicans are playing reckless political games with the economy and full faith and credit of the United States by refusing to pay the bill that Donald Trump helped rack up. This is disastrous dine and dash by congressional Republicans that America cannot afford.
Well, just like Senator Durbin's always been there to spend taxpayer dollars, he was there to spend those dollars, and rightfully so, in a bipartisan way at the beginning of a pandemic. But in the end, what Senator Durbin doesn't tell you is I can remember just a few years ago when we were in the majority and Senator Durbin kept calling for a clean CR. Let's do a clean continuing resolution. Let's do a clean debt ceiling increase. And instead, what he's trying to do is hide from discussing the $3.5 trillion that he wants to cast on to the American people. And that's where the disagreement is in Washington right now. I'll proudly stand up against the $3.5 trillion package that Senator Durbin and Democrats want to pass on to the next generation. That's something we're going to continue to fight against. And I'm kind of glad that Senator Durbin's a little upset by the politics that's going on because he played a lot of politics over the last few decades in Washington, D.C.
Congressman, is there anything in the $3.5 trillion that Republicans can get on board with?
Well, I'm sure there are some good provisions in a $3.5 trillion package. But the overwhelming number of provisions are really progressive provisions that could cripple our economy. Cripple our energy sector even more than Governor Pritzker signing the energy bill in Illinois did just a few weeks ago. And that's saying something.
Congressman, we've got, of course, a whole bunch of other things going on in Washington, D.C. I just saw a story about, this is something I was scratching my head about. When I first saw it pop up, I was like, that can't be real. It can't be real that President Biden wants to surveil any transaction over $600 in people's bank accounts. And the American Bankers Association pushed back against this. But what's your understanding of the latest on this proposal? And what would that mean for your constituents, listening here about, ready to go make purchases for an air conditioner or, a refrigerator or whatever it may be? What's the latest on that possibility?
It's crazy. I remember when the Democrats said they were the party of civil liberties. This is one of those provisions that kind of makes you take a step back and wonder why Democrats are in charge. They're continuing to try and decimate our financial sector. And at the same time, I mean, who wants to know that you spent $600 on a new water heater? I don't. And frankly, it's another cost that's going to raise the cost of doing business for our financial institutions, which ends up costing customers more. And that's something we've got to get a handle on in the financial services sector, because Dodd-Frank's already requiring a lot of banks to have compliance personnel, people that aren't doing anything to serve the customer, but just filling out the required government paperwork. And this is another step that Democrats want to add to that.
Congressman Rodney Davis with us on the WMAY morning news feed, 728. Just a few more things here. Let's see, of course, you're in Congress, but your constituents are in Illinois, so they kind of get not just hit with everything that's coming out of Washington, D.C., but also everything that's coming out of the State House. And we have not really out of the State House, but out of the governor's office mandates for healthcare workers, for educators, for college students to get COVID-19 vaccines or to submit to testing. And we're seeing that it's causing some confusion. You've got school districts saying that they're not going to be excluding staff who don't comply because of the 1998 law, the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act, saying that even though they may have the authority to keep people from school, they don't want to risk lengthy lawsuits that could cost taxpayers tens of thousands of dollars in trying to mitigate that. So they're asking for some clarity. Where are you at on this vaccine mandate, and even the Biden administration putting out rules or hoping to put rules out through OSHA to require the vaccine mandate? And the president's going to come to Chicago tomorrow to promote that. What should happen here? Should this be something that we heard a poll this morning saying that people are getting the vaccine because it's mandated. They're not getting the vaccine because they think it's for their best health. Is that the best way to get people to accept this?
Absolutely not. I think there's probably a reason I wasn't invited by the White House to go with the president to Illinois, because they know that I'm not for mandates. As a matter of fact, it's pretty offensive to our healthcare heroes who worked throughout this entire pandemic. Some of them caught the infection during the worst of the pandemic. They've got natural immunity. They've got some questions about the vaccine. They don't need to be fired from their job. And these are the types of decisions that are best left to families rather than government. And unfortunately, we've seen that the vaccines that I've proudly told everybody, I think you reduce your risk of getting a very tough case of COVID by getting them. I got vaccinated. But at the same time, we're also seeing that they're not as effective as what we were once told, and may have to actually do something on a more regular basis. It's okay to take a step back and make sure we have the science and the data without government telling us to do something and having people in places where we have a workforce shortage worry about losing their job.
And we've seen at least 2 teachers in Springfield be on paid administrative leave, or unpaid leave, I should say, for not wanting to comply with the regular testing. We'll see how this impacts the healthcare sector as well. And anytime that the OSHA rules come out, Congressman, just briefly on that, what are you hearing there? I mean, is it going to be a couple of weeks, or are these emergency temporary standards just going to pop out of nowhere and then all of a sudden it's businesses have to comply?
Usually that's the way they operate here in Washington, unfortunately. I certainly hope that we get some clarity out of the rule makers, out of OSHA, out of the regulatory regime here in Washington, D.C. But at some point, we as Americans have to take a step back, and we've got to look at COVID as a risk management issue rather than a zero tolerance issue. I have my thoughts on where the virus came from, but it's not going back in the bottle. It's not going back in the test tube. We're going to have to live with it at some point, figure out how to manage this risk and get back to where we were pre-March 2020. And the Democratic Party in Washington and in Illinois, they want to have a zero tolerance effort, which we're never going to succeed with a virus that's already been out there in our communities for so long.
Congressman Rodney Davis, greatly appreciate you taking the time with us this morning, and we'll definitely connect again soon, all right? Be safe out there.
You too, buddy. Take care.
It's the WMAY morning news feed, now 7:32, and the forecasts. We'll get that with Kevin Hart as he delivers news.
New man in charge at the Springfield FBI from the WMAY newsroom.